I had been dreaming about this weekend for weeks. My lake house, my sanctuary, my escape from the chaos of work and city life. The thought of stepping onto my deck, coffee in hand, with the water sparkling under the morning sun, was enough to make me grin like a kid on Christmas. But as I drove down the familiar gravel road, something felt off. My driveway, which I knew like the back of my hand, was lined with cars I didn't recognize. SUVs, sedans, even a small rental van tucked into the corner. My stomach sank. That didn't look like a neighbor dropping by, it looked like an invasion. I parked, gripping the steering wheel a little too tight, and squinted at the front of my house. And there she was, Karen, HOA Karen, the woman who believed she had the moral high ground over every square inch of property in the neighborhood. She was standing like a general inspecting her troops, clipboard in hand, barking orders at a group of strangers who were lounging in my yard as if they owned the place. Karen, my voice cracked just slightly. I tried again. Karen, what are you doing here? She turned and that smug little smile appeared, the one that makes your skin crawl. Oh, you must be the homeowner, she said, her voice dripping with fake cheer. You caught us mid-operation, don't worry, everything's under control. My blood ran cold. Operation, control. My house wasn't supposed to be under anyone's control but mine. I stepped closer, trying to process the scene. There were people sitting in my living room, laughing and drinking coffee. One of them waved at me as if I was part of their weekend getaway. My hands itched to grab the front door handle and throw everyone out, but I stopped myself. I needed information first. What is going on? I asked, keeping my voice calm though my heart was pounding. Why are there strangers in my house? Karen clutched her clipboard like it was a shield. Oh, don't worry, we're just managing rentals. You know, making sure the property is active and serving the community. It's all very official. I blinked. Rentals, my lake house. I wanted to laugh, except the absurdity of it made my blood boil instead. She had turned my peaceful weekend retreat into her own secret airbnb, and the worst part, she didn't even bother to hide it. I pretended to walk toward the backyard, scanning the living room from the corner of my eye. There it was, proof. A folder labeled guest agreements, a small stack of key cards with names and dates, and even a breakfast menu from a local cafe sitting on the counter. Every detail confirmed my suspicion. Karen had been running a secret rental business out of my house without my knowledge. I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. I couldn't let her see me lose it, not yet. Karen thrived on control, on making people feel small and powerless. I needed a plan, and I needed it fast. As I walked slowly past the group of guests, my mind raced. How long had this been going on? Weeks? Months? And how many people had she let into my home while I was blissfully unaware, thinking it was my sanctuary? I heard her mutter something about community profits and had to bite back a laugh. Community profits? I was starting to understand the lengths she would go to justify her madness. Then it hit me, if she was bold enough to run this operation in my own house, she wasn't just careless. She was ambitious, dangerous even. I backed away toward my truck, pretending to take a call, all the while watching her like a hawk. Karen was completely unaware that her little empire was about to crumble. I had no idea yet what tools I would need, but one thing was certain. I was going to take my lake house back, piece by piece, and Karen would regret the day she crossed me. Little did I know, walking into my own home that day was only the beginning of the chaos. By the time the weekend was over, Karen's secret rental operation wouldn't be the only thing exposed. And that's when I realized something terrifying. The real challenge wasn't getting my house back, it was surviving the wrath of HOA Karen while keeping my sanity intact. I took a deep breath and stepped onto the porch, trying to act casual though my hands were shaking. Every instinct screamed at me to storm inside and reclaim my home, but I had to be smart. Karen had power here. She carried the aura of authority like a weapon, and the last thing I wanted was to give her a reason to pull the HOA's rules out like a medieval sword. Karen, I started, keeping my voice calm, this is my house. You can't just let strangers in here. She looked at me with a mock expression of surprise, as if I'd just interrupted a royal banquet. Oh, relax, we're just managing rentals for the community. You know, helping out neighbors who can't visit their own property. Everything's perfectly legal. Perfectly legal? I wanted to laugh so hard I almost fell off the porch. My heart pounded. She was standing there, clipboard in hand, pretending this was normal and I was supposed to nod politely. I stepped closer, scanning the living room again. The guests froze, awkwardly looking between Karen and me, unsure whose side they were supposed to be on. I forced a tight smile and said, do they even know they're in my house? Karen tilted her head and gave a smug little smile. Oh, they know, don't worry, they signed agreements, paid fees, everything is above board, I even vetted them personally. I blinked. She vetted them personally. My own house had become her playground, and apparently she was the gatekeeper of fun weekends for strangers. Karen, I said, my voice lowering slightly, you do realize this is my property, right? My lake house, and unless you have my permission. You don't understand, she interrupted, waving a hand. I'm protecting community interests. You could have tenants who don't respect the HOA, and I am saving you from potential fines and complaints. I froze. She was seriously trying to justify turning my house into a secret rental under the guise of protection. The audacity. I could almost hear the gears in my brain turning as I plotted my next move. I think you mean protecting yourself, I said carefully, letting the words drip with calm sarcasm, not protecting me. Karen frowned, a flash of irritation crossing her face, but she quickly masked it with a polite, rehearsed smile. That's when I realized the power struggle had begun. This wasn't just about rentals anymore. It was about ego, about control, about Karen proving she could bend my property to her will. I took a step toward the living room, pretending to inspect the decorations, though my eyes were glued to her every move. Each laugh from the guests made my skin crawl. They didn't belong here. This is my space, I thought, my sanctuary, and Karen had turned it into a performance stage. I need you to leave, I said firmly, louder this time. Now, all of you, this is my home. Karen's expression flickered just a fraction, and I knew I had struck a nerve. You're being unreasonable, she said, as if I were the one breaking the rules. You don't even know the full benefits of this arrangement. Community members are happy. Everything is transparent. You're overreacting. Overreacting? I could feel my patience snapping. I had spent years keeping my home exactly the way I wanted it, and this woman had barged in like a dictator, waving HOA rules as a shield. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. Karen, this ends today. Either you leave voluntarily or I'm calling the authorities. I don't care about your bylaws or your community agreements. This is my home, and I am not negotiating. For a moment she froze. I could see the calculation behind her eyes, the subtle weighing of options. Then she straightened her shoulders, tilting her chin slightly. You're threatening me? She asked, voice tight but controlled. No, I said slowly, letting each word land. I'm informing you. The guests shifted uneasily. I could see some of them realizing they might be part of something illegal. One of them mumbled something about being unaware of the arrangement. Karen glared at them, her control slipping slightly. I took another step forward, letting the tension build. Every moment was a test. Who would crack first? The air was thick with suspense. I knew I needed more than threats, I needed proof. And that's when I noticed it, a folder sticking out from under the couch. My heart skipped. If I could grab that, I could expose her entire operation. I forced myself to remain calm, pretending to admire a painting while edging closer to the hidden evidence. I wasn't sure what Karen would do if she realized what I was up to, but one thing was certain, this confrontation was only the beginning. By the time I was done, she wouldn't just be embarrassed, she would regret ever thinking she could run my lake house like her personal hotel. And just like that, the weekend I had been dreaming of had turned into a high-stakes battle, one that I wasn't about to lose. I needed proof, solid, undeniable proof. Threats alone wouldn't work against Karen. She was clever, manipulative, and she knew all the loopholes in her HOA handbook. If I wanted to take my house back, I had to find evidence that would make even her smug little smile falter. I pretended to pace the living room, casually scanning the shelves, the furniture, even the fake decorative pillows she had somehow arranged to look like my style. Meanwhile, my eyes were fixed on the stack of papers peeking from under the couch. My pulse raced. That folder could be the key to exposing everything. Karen was still in her element, barking instructions at the guests. No, don't put your shoes on the deck, and be careful with the coffee machine, it's antique. Her absurd attention to detail made me bite back a laugh. Only Karen would turn a perfectly ordinary kitchen into a battlefield of etiquette. I edged closer to the couch, pretending to admire a photo frame. My hand brushed the folder and I felt a surge of triumph. That's when I heard her voice behind me, sharp and warning. Careful there, that's private information. I froze, slowly straightening up. Oh, I was just checking if everything is in order, I said casually, trying to sound like a concerned homeowner rather than someone who had just found her smoking gun. Karen narrowed her eyes but didn't come closer. Maybe she didn't notice the folder, or maybe she was confident she could bluff me. Either way, I had a chance and I wasn't going to waste it. I waited until she turned to instruct the guests on how to hang towels properly, then slid the folder into my backpack. My hands were shaking with adrenaline, but I forced myself to act normal. I even smiled at one of the guests, who gave me a confused, almost guilty look. Clearly, some of them weren't entirely comfortable with this secret rental scheme either. Once I was safely in the kitchen, I flipped open the folder. Inside were rental agreements, a ledger of payments, and even screenshots of online listings, my house for rent under Karen's name. My stomach twisted with anger. She hadn't just trespassed, she had stolen my property rights and turned them into a business. And somehow she thought she could get away with it. I needed to think fast. Confronting her again without leverage would be useless. I had to gather more evidence, more proof of the scope of this operation. I noticed a small notebook labeled guest notes tucked under the coffee table. Sliding it out, I found detailed logs, dates, times, guest names, complaints, even notes about how to maximize community profits. It was insane. She had planned this like a corporate enterprise, and my house was the headquarters. My heart pounded. How many weekends had she done this? How many people had stayed in my house without me knowing? I felt a mix of rage and disbelief, but underneath it all, a spark of excitement ignited. Finally, I had the ammunition to take her down. I slipped the notebook into my bag, making sure to keep my movements casual. Karen was still busy lecturing someone about proper coaster placement, completely unaware that her empire was being dismantled in real time. Then I noticed something even more suspicious. A small key box hidden behind the curtain near the back door. My curiosity got the better of me. Could she have hidden even more secrets? I approached slowly, pretending to adjust the curtain for better light. My fingers closed around the box, and I realized it contained keys labeled with unit numbers, clearly linked to her secret rentals. Every piece of evidence I found made one thing clear. Karen's little operation was massive, and she had carefully concealed it from everyone, including me. But now her perfect little world was crumbling, and I had the tools to bring it down. I took a deep breath and looked around. The guests were still oblivious, and Karen was momentarily distracted, chatting with one of them about lake activities. This was my moment. I had to plan my next move carefully. One wrong step, and she could still spin this into another bylaw threat. As I quietly backed toward the door, my mind raced with possibilities. I could call the authorities, the HOA board, even go public with the evidence. But I knew I needed one more thing before making my move, a direct confrontation where I had all the leverage. And I realized, with a sinking thrill, that I was about to enter a battle of wits with the most overbearing HOA president in history. Karen had underestimated me. She had no idea the storm that was coming. The folder, the notebook, the key box, it was all in my hands now. My house was mine, and I wasn't letting anyone take it from me, not even HOA Karen. Little did she know, the confrontation I had avoided in part 2 was only the beginning. And by the time I revealed what I had discovered, Karen's smug little smile would disappear forever. I knew I couldn't wait any longer, sitting on my porch pretending everything was fine while Karen ran my lake house like a boutique hotel had gone on long enough. I had the evidence, I had the proof, and now it was time to confront her, face to face, in a way she couldn't ignore. I walked back into the house, my backpack snug against my shoulder, heart pounding in a mix of adrenaline and fear. The guests looked up as I entered, surprise written all over their faces. One of them whispered, are you supposed to be here?" "Yes," I said sharply, giving them a look that made it clear they weren't supposed to be in my living room. They quickly shuffled toward the kitchen, avoiding my gaze. Good, let them stew in their guilt while I focused on Karen. She was at the center of the chaos, clipboard in hand, barking instructions like a drill sergeant. "Remember, no jumping in the lake before breakfast, and someone please monitor the coffee machine." She didn't notice me at first, which gave me the perfect opportunity. I cleared my throat. "Karen's." Her head snapped around, and for a moment I thought I saw genuine surprise flash across her face, but she quickly masked it with that smug, infuriating smile. "Yes, homeowner," she said, sweetly but with just enough edge to make me want to scream. I dropped my backpack onto the floor, letting it thud heavily. "I think we need to have a little chat." She arched an eyebrow. "About?" I walked toward her, pulling out the folder, then the notebook, and finally the key box. "About this," I said, spreading everything on the table in plain view. "These are records of every single guest you've let into my house without my permission. Every rental, every payment, every single lie you've told to make it look legitimate." Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly recovered, attempting to laugh it off. "Oh, it's all part of the HOA's community program. We're helping neighbors maximize their property." I slammed my hand down on the table, making the folder jump. "Stop right there. This is my house, my property, not your playground. You do not have the right to run a rental business in it without my knowledge, and you certainly don't get to hide it behind HOA rules." Karen's smile faltered, just slightly, but I noticed. She took a step back, clutching her clipboard like it was a shield. Well, you don't understand the bigger picture, the community benefits. I'm just protecting everyone from. From what? I snapped, stepping closer. From the fact that you're running a secret business in my home. I could feel my blood pressure climbing, but I forced myself to stay calm. The calm fury was worse than shouting, it made her stumble. The guests were whispering nervously, some trying to hide behind chairs. It was clear they had no idea they were caught up in this mess. Karen glanced at them, then back at me, clearly trying to regain control. I leaned in slightly, letting my voice drop so that even Karen had to lean in to hear me. I have proof of everything. The ledger, the agreements, the online listings. If I go to the HOA board or the authorities, you won't just be embarrassed. You could face legal consequences. She swallowed hard. For the first time, the air of invincibility cracked. That's extreme, she muttered a little too sharply. I smiled, not out of kindness, but because I knew the power had shifted. No, that's reality. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her clipboard. You can't just, this is unfair. Unfair, I said, my voice rising slightly. Karen, you've turned my house into a secret hotel. You've lied, manipulated, and violated my property rights. And you think I'm being unfair. The room went quiet. Even the guests were staring, sensing the tension. I had the upper hand now. Karen's confidence was cracked, and I knew that if I pressed further, I could dismantle her entire scheme. I backed up slowly, letting the weight of the evidence speak for itself. I suggest you start explaining this to the HOA board and the guests you've been deceiving. Otherwise, the next call I make will be to the authorities. Karen's face was pale now. The smugness was gone. Her carefully constructed empire was falling apart, and she knew it. For a moment, she simply stared at the evidence, then at me, realizing she had underestimated just how far I was willing to go to reclaim my home. And in that moment, I felt a surge of satisfaction. This confrontation was only the beginning. Karen had made one big mistake. She thought she could run my life and my house without consequences. I just had to make sure she never tried it again. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind raced with everything I had discovered, Karen's secret rentals, her blatant disregard for my property, and the growing feeling that this was far bigger than just my lake house. I knew the next step had to be public. The HOA meeting was the perfect stage to expose her, and I was ready. The next morning, I drove to the HOA office, folder and notebook in hand, adrenaline pumping. As I stepped inside, I immediately sensed the tension. Karen was already there, seated like a queen on a throne, clipboard balanced perfectly on her lap. She gave me that same smug look, as if she already knew she would win. I smiled to myself. She had no idea what was coming. The room was filled with neighbors, all murmuring quietly, some curious, some clearly frustrated with the HOA in general. I had a small hope that a few of them had noticed Karen's overreach, and maybe, just maybe, they would side with me. The meeting began, and as expected, Karen spoke first. Welcome everyone, she said, her voice sweet but commanding. We're here to discuss community operations, property management, and the ways we are maximizing benefits for everyone. She paused, glancing at me with that tiny smirk, including our lake house programs. A few heads turned. I saw some confused expressions. I couldn't resist a small grin. This was going to be fun. When it was my turn, I stood and cleared my throat. Actually, Karen, I think the community should hear the full story about the lake house program. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't interrupt. I opened my folder and began to lay out the evidence, rental agreements, ledgers, and guest logs. I explained, calmly but firmly, how Karen had been secretly running a rental business in my property without my knowledge. The room went quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Even Karen's smug demeanor faltered as she realized all eyes were now on her. This isn't just about my house, I continued, it's about trust. The community depends on transparency and honesty, and when someone like Karen manipulates the system for personal gain, it affects all of us. One neighbor raised an eyebrow. Are you saying she was running rentals in your house? Yes, I said, holding up the ledger, and not just occasionally. Every weekend, she hosted guests without consent, using the HOA as a cover. This isn't oversight, it's exploitation. Murmurs spread through the room. Some neighbors whispered to each other, clearly outraged. Others looked shocked, probably realizing how much authority they had blindly trusted Karen with. Karen tried to interject, her voice slightly shaky. I was only trying to help. The community benefits, the properties are active and… Helping, I interrupted, voice firm. By taking control of someone's home without permission, that's not helping Karen, that's theft by deception. The room erupted in whispers and shocked reactions. A few neighbors leaned forward, scrutinizing her, clearly questioning everything they had trusted her with. She tried to recover, attempting to explain herself, but every word sounded weaker than the last. I continued, showing screenshots of online listings and guest logs. The evidence was overwhelming. Karen's composure cracked further with every page I revealed. I could see her hands trembling slightly as she fumbled with her clipboard, realizing her empire was collapsing in real time. One neighbor, Mr. Thompson, the one who always looked like he was judging the world, stood up. "This is outrageous. If what she's done is true, there need to be consequences. She can't just manipulate everyone under the guise of the HOA." I nodded, feeling a surge of vindication. Exactly. This isn't just about me, it's about accountability. Karen needs to answer for her actions, and the community deserves transparency. Karen's face turned red, and for the first time, she didn't try to speak. The room had turned against her, and I could feel the shift in power. The smugness was gone, replaced with a look of panic. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that Karen's control was over. The HOA board agreed to investigate, and several neighbors approached me afterward, thanking me for exposing her schemes. The satisfaction of seeing her unravel in front of the entire community was indescribable. As I walked out of the meeting, I felt a mixture of relief and triumph. I had taken the first real step toward reclaiming my home, and Karen had no idea the next moves I had planned. The battle wasn't over yet, but now I held all the cards. And somewhere deep down, I knew the next chapter would be even more intense. Karen wasn't the type to give up quietly, and I had to be ready for whatever she tried next. After the HOA meeting, I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. Karen wasn't the type to quietly accept defeat. She was already plotting her next move, and I could feel it in the way the neighborhood seemed a little tense, like everyone was waiting for the next disaster. It started small. The day after the meeting, I got a call from someone claiming to be an HOA inspector. He had the kind of deep, official-sounding voice that made you nod automatically, and he wanted to inspect my property immediately. Sure, I said cautiously, glancing at my lake house through the window. Something felt off. When he arrived, I noticed the little things that made my gut twist. His clipboard was blank, his shoes were scuffed, and he kept glancing nervously toward the tree line. This wasn't an official inspection, it was Karen's next move. She was trying to intimidate me. As he walked through my home, measuring cabinets and opening cupboards with exaggerated thoroughness, I tried to keep calm. My mind raced. What is she hoping to find? I muttered under my breath. That my soap dispenser is an inch off from HOA-approved height. I decided to play along, letting him poke around while keeping a mental note of everything. My camera was rolling secretly, proof that these inspections were a sham and that Karen was behind them. Meanwhile, the tension in the neighborhood escalated. Neighbors whispered in the streets, and I started noticing little notes on my mailbox. "We support Karen," or "Be careful with HOA rules." I laughed to myself. This was Karen's last desperate attempt to regain control. She was trying to turn the entire community against me, but I had something she didn't: evidence. The inspector finally left, mumbling something about documenting everything, and I knew I had captured it all on camera. I couldn't wait to see Karen squirm when the proof surfaced. Then came the threats, emails, letters, even text messages, all carefully worded to make me doubt myself. "This is your final warning," one read. "Cease interference or face consequences under HOA bylaws." The sheer audacity made my blood boil. She really thought she could scare me. I stared at my laptop, reviewing the evidence I had collected so far: the ledger, guest logs, online listings, secret keys, and now the fake inspection video. It was overwhelming just how bold she had been. And yet it gave me a strange satisfaction. Every attempt she made to intimidate me was only digging her deeper into the hole. I realized then that Karen's desperation was her weakness. She had been so focused on control, on appearances, that she had underestimated one thing: my determination. And I wasn't just going to sit back and watch. I had to plan my next move carefully, combining strategy with exposure. Late that night, I walked through my house, thinking about how far Karen would go. I could almost see her packing in her office, plotting, imagining the perfect way to regain dominance. But she hadn't counted on me, not now, not ever. The suspense was unbearable. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle outside made me wonder if Karen had sent someone to spy on me. My adrenaline kept me on edge, but it also sharpened my focus. I knew the next confrontation had to be decisive. One wrong move and she could still twist the situation, but if I played my cards right, she would have no escape. I spent hours drafting a plan. I would expose the fake inspections, reveal the secret rental operation, and make sure the HOA board saw the full extent of her manipulation. The key was timing. The next move had to be public, undeniable, and humiliating enough that Karen couldn't recover. And then I remembered the neighbors who had quietly supported me during the meeting. They were a wild card I could use. If enough of them spoke up, Karen's influence would crumble even faster. By the time I went to bed, I was exhausted but energized. Karen had escalated, but that only meant the final showdown was near. I knew she would try one last manipulation, one last desperate act to regain control, and I also knew that when that moment came, she wouldn't be ready for what I had planned. The lake house, my sanctuary, had become a battleground, but I wasn't just fighting for property, I was fighting for justice, for sanity, and for the truth. And deep down, I smiled. The storm was coming, and Karen was about to be caught right in the eye of it. I thought I had uncovered everything. The rental agreements, the guest logs, the fake inspections, the secret keys, every piece of Karen's scheme was in my hands. I felt a thrill of satisfaction knowing I could bring her down at any moment, but I was about to discover that the truth was even crazier than I imagined. It started with a tip. One of the guests from the previous weekend had slipped me a note, nervous and shaking. "You're not going to believe this," it said. "There's a whole hidden operation upstairs, rooms you've never seen, booked online, with Karen pretending to be the landlord." My stomach dropped. Upstairs, my lake house only had 2 floors. Had she really converted my attic, or worse, some hidden space, into a secret Arab empire? I couldn't wait any longer. I grabbed my backpack, slipped the folder and notebook inside, and quietly ascended the stairs. Every creak of the floorboard under my feet felt like a warning. My heart pounded as I reached the top, trying to imagine what I might find. And then I saw it, a hidden door cleverly disguised as part of the wall paneling with a small, ornate handle. My pulse raced. Karen had been so meticulous, so obsessive, that she had gone to the trouble of creating a secret rental suite entirely hidden from the rest of the house. I took a deep breath and turned the handle. The door opened to a small hallway lined with doors, each labeled with a unit number and bizarrely small laminated welcome signs. I stepped inside and my jaw dropped. There were fully furnished rooms, tiny, cozy spaces complete with bedding, minibars, and personal touches that made it clear Karen had spent months making this feel like a professional rental operation. Each room had a guest logbook, receipts, and even small gifts for the visitors. I walked through one room and picked up a tablet that had been left on the desk. On it, I found a booking site where Karen had been advertising my house, complete with photos she had staged herself. The dates matched the ledger I already had, but this was on a massive scale. She wasn't just running occasional weekend rentals, she had turned my entire lake house into a clandestine hospitality business right under my nose. And then I saw the final detail that made my blood boil. A folder labeled HOA approval documents, fake letters, forged signatures, and official stamps. Karen had created the illusion that the HOA had sanctioned her secret operation. Every legal loophole she claimed to be following was a lie. Every rule she waved in my face had been manipulated to protect herself, not the community. I felt a mix of rage and awe. The audacity of this woman was unbelievable, and yet I couldn't help but smirk. I had been waiting for the right moment, and now I had even more leverage than I had imagined. Karen's empire wasn't just fragile, it was explosive. I knew I had to act fast. If she discovered I had found this, she could erase everything, cover her tracks, and manipulate the HOA again. I snapped photos, recorded videos, and carefully cataloged each room. Every piece of evidence would be undeniable, leaving her no chance to deny or justify her actions. But the real twist hit me when I peeked into the last room. There, tucked into a corner, was a wall-mounted monitor showing live feeds of the front entrance, the porch, and the driveway. Karen had been monitoring every guest, every visitor, every move in my own house. She had cameras everywhere. I felt a chill. She wasn't just running rentals, she was running surveillance on my property. That's when it clicked. The fake inspections, the concerned neighbors, the way she had manipulated everyone, it wasn't just about money. It was about control. She had turned my lake house into her personal kingdom, and everyone else was just part of the game. I backed out quietly, my mind racing. I had everything I needed to take her down, and now I understood the full scope of her operation. This wasn't just an HOA overreach, it was criminal. As I reached the main floor, I knew what had to happen next. Karen had overplayed her hand. Her arrogance, her obsession with control, her complete disregard for me as the homeowner, it all made her vulnerable. And I had a plan. By the time the community, the HOA board, and anyone else involved saw the evidence, Karen wouldn't just be embarrassed, she would be exposed. Completely. The twist wasn't just that she had been running a secret business in my home. The twist was that she had built a hidden empire right under my nose, and I held the key to destroying it. This was the moment everything changed. The calm, calculated fight I had been preparing for had become a full-blown showdown. And Karen had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I knew it was time. Karen's secret empire, the fake inspections, the rental logs, the hidden suites, even the surveillance cameras, everything was documented. I had proof that was undeniable. Now it was just a matter of exposing it in a way she couldn't spin or hide. I started by calling the HOA board, scheduling an emergency meeting. I made it clear this wasn't a minor complaint, it was a full-blown violation with legal and ethical consequences. When I arrived, Karen was already there, clipboard in hand, trying to project calm, but I could see the tension in her posture. The arrogance had faded, replaced with a cautious, calculating anxiety. I set my backpack on the table and began laying out the evidence. Photos, videos, spreadsheets, guest logs, screenshots of online bookings, and the damning surveillance footage. Every piece pointed to one conclusion. Karen had been running a full-scale rental business in my lake house without permission, manipulating the HOA, deceiving neighbors, and spying on me in my own home. Karen opened her mouth to speak, but the room fell silent. The board members leaned forward, reviewing each document carefully. Her confident smile faltered. She realized that this time there was no escape, no community benefits excuse that would save her. One board member, Ms. Franklin, looked up from the folder I handed her. "This is extensive," she said slowly, her voice filled with disbelief. "If these documents are accurate, Karen has violated multiple HOA regulations and property laws." Karen stammered, I was only trying to help, I didn't think." "You didn't think?" I interrupted, letting the frustration in my voice show. "You turned my home into a hotel, forged documents, and monitored my property without consent. That's not helping, it's criminal, and it ends today." Some of the neighbors who had attended previous meetings nodded in agreement. I could see relief on their faces. Finally, someone had stood up to Karen. The tension in the room shifted. Karen, once untouchable, was shrinking under the weight of her own actions. I pulled out my phone and played a short video from the hidden suite upstairs, the rooms, the keys, the guest logs, and the surveillance setup. The board members' jaws dropped. Karen's attempts to explain, to justify, to charm were falling flat. Every excuse sounded weaker than the last. By the time I finished, the board made a unanimous decision. Karen would be removed from her position immediately, stripped of all HOA privileges, and required to answer for her secret rental operation to the authorities. Her control over my property and the neighborhood was officially over. I could see the shock and fury in her eyes, but also a hint of fear. For the first time, she realized that her empire had collapsed and there was no way to spin it. She had underestimated me, underestimated my determination, and underestimated how far I would go to reclaim what was mine. As the meeting ended, neighbors approached me, congratulating me for standing up. Some laughed at the absurdity of Karen's overreach, while others shook their heads in disbelief. One neighbor whispered, "I can't believe she thought she could get away with it." I smiled, exhausted but victorious. My lake house was finally mine again, free from surveillance, secret rentals, and HOA tyranny. I had not only reclaimed my property, but had also exposed one of the most audacious HOA schemes I had ever witnessed. That evening, I walked along the lake, breathing in the crisp air and feeling the water lap against the dock. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. My sanctuary was back, peaceful, quiet, mine. And as I sat on the deck, sipping my coffee, I couldn't help but chuckle. Karen had tried to turn my weekend getaway into a business empire. She had underestimated me at every turn. But in the end, justice and a little bit of cunning had won. The lesson was clear: never underestimate a homeowner determined to protect their property, and never ever let an HOA Karen think they can run your life for you. As the lake reflected the fading sunlight, I realized something else. This wasn't just about taking back my house. It was about reclaiming control over my life, my peace, and my freedom, and that, I decided, was priceless. Karen was gone, her schemes exposed, and my lake house was finally my own again. And for the first time in weeks, I could relax, knowing that no one, not even an overzealous HOA president, could ever take it from me. Every HOA has a story on HOA Headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.